In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to configure HSRP for two different VLANs. So in this example, I've got HSRP, and HSRP stands for Hot Standby Router Protocol. And it's a default gateway redundancy protocol that's proprietary to Cisco. And what it does is it permits two routers to be set up. One is a primary, and another is a failover for hosts in a specific VLAN. So in this example, I've got hosts in VLAN 10, and I've got a server in VLAN 11. So they're going to use both routers. One is a primary, and the other is a failover. So if the links fail to router 1, for example, the packets from server 1 will then be diverted over to router 2. And the same thing with the host. If router 1 is not available, then the packets will be diverted over to router 2 on the inside interfaces. And what that does is that provides failover default gateway. In the hosts themselves, they're configured with a static default gateway IP address that you get from a DHCP server, and the server as well, and that doesn't change. So a virtual IP address is actually configured that's shared between these two routers. And so if router 1 is not available, it's the primary, then the virtual IP address is shifted over to router 2, and so the host just use the same virtual IP address that matches their default gateway, only just the packets would go through router 2. So what I'm going to do is I'll start with router 1, and I'm going to sign on and start with configuring HSRP. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start with this inside interface on router 1. This is going to be the primary default gateway. A default gateway is an IP address, so it's just where packets are forwarded. So this is going to be the primary for hosts on VLAN 10, the hosts that are assigned to VLAN 10, and that's both hosts. And 10 is going to be the primary for the server 1, and that's in VLAN 11. So they're going to be in two different VLANs, but router 1 will be the primary for both VLANs, the host in VLAN 10 and the server in VLAN 11. So we'll start out with FA00. And I'll just assign an IP address to it, 192.168.1.2. That's on the physical interface. I'll go over here. This is where I'm starting with 00. This is going to be 12. And then standby version 2, that means the HSRP version I'm using is 2. Then it's standby 1 IP. This is the virtual IP address that both routers are going to share, although the primary will have it as active, and if it's not available, then router 2 will use that virtual IP address. It'll be assigned to it. And standby 1 priority 110. The default is 100. So if I assign 110 to router 1, then it will always be the primary unless it's not available, and then the failover will have a higher priority if router 1 is not available, because the priority will go down to 0. And preempt just means it's preempting router 2 unless it's not available. So it would be the primary. So the next command I want to do is after 12 is just the standby commands. Standby version 2, and then standby 1 is just a group number. I'm not doing multiple groups for this. It's just a single group HSRP. And then 1.1 is going to be the virtual IP address. Got too many IPs in there. And then the next one is going to be the priority command. So that's the same group. I'm using 1, and priority is going to be 110, making it the primary router. And then just a standard preempt command. And then no shut because it's a layer 3 interface. Then I'm going to move on to 10 on the same router, 1N0 interface. And this is this is going to be for the server primary interface now. And it's going to be assigned to an address that's in the same subnet as the server, and that's in VLAN 11. So that'll be 2 subnet, and 2.2 will be the interface. And so what I'll do is 2.2 will be the interface on router 1, 2.3 will be the interface for the failover on router 2, and 2.1 will be the virtual IP address. So they're in the same subnet. there's the IP address, and in standby version 2, same commands. And then the standby 1 IP 192.168. This is the virtual IP address for the server. And it'll be just a 2.1. And then the priority command makes router 1 the priority for or the primary for the server 1 device. So router 1 is going to be the primary for it. There's 110, and then the preempt command. Then a no shut to activate it, because it's going to be the active, because it's a layer 3 interface. And then I'm going to go over to router 2 now and configure some of that. This is the failover router for both VLANs. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is start with the inside interface 00, and that's for the host, and that'll be the failover gateway for the host. And I'll assign an IP address 192.168.1.3. So I'm working on router 2 now, so there's 1.3. It's going to get the same commands. Standby version 2, or version 2 of HSRP, and then standby 1 IP 192.168, and this is going to be the same. This is for the host, so it's going to be the same virtual IP address on both routers. It's going to be 1.1 for the host, and then just the standard preempt command. Okay, then no shut. So that's okay there. So that's 00, and everything looks fine there. There's no priority command on the failover router because the priority command is issued on the router that you want to be the primary, so the other one there by default then becomes the failover. So I want to do the interface 10 on router 2, and that's this one here. This is the inside interface for the server 1. This will be the failover gateway for server 1. So I want to configure that now. Okay, and then I'm going to do an IP address here, 192.168. And this will be virtual is 2.1. This is 2.2, so this should be 2.3. And make sure I got my addressing correct. And it is 2.3. That's okay. And then just a standby command now. Standby version 2 has to match. Then same group 1. I'm going to use an IP of 2.1 because this is the static default gateway, same on both routers for VLAN 11. That's 2.1. And standby 1 preempt. And then just do a no shut. And that does the current configuration. Now I just want to do a show standby, show you what the configuration looks like. It's an operational command. It tells you the current status of things. This example, state is standby. I'm on router 2 and 1.1. And that's standby for 1.1 is the host. And gives you some timers. There's the virtual IP address and virtual MAC address. Priority is 100, it's lower than 110. And if I go something like, if I want to go show standby, I'll show you VLAN 11. And in that case, this is the VLAN 11, and this is same thing. tells you the virtual IP address for 10. So it's not the it's just the failover router. If I go to router 1, I do show standby. It's going to show that the virtual IP is still 11 on this router as well, because it doesn't change. State is active, and that means it's the active primary router, and it should be. It's not the standby. And there's 11, so that's the host default gateway, and the MAC address as well, because every interface has a virtual MAC as well. And active router is the local one. Standby is 13. We know that it's got a lower priority. It's router 2. This one has priority of 110. And if I go show standby FA10, and this is state is active, and this is now VLAN 11, so it's saying the router 1 is active for gateway for VLAN 11 as well, and that's 2.1. That's the server, and shows the same information. The standby router is 2.3, so that's router 2. This is VLAN 11 information. So I'm just doing the same show standby for 10 on router 1, and that's for server 1. So what I'll do now is just going to run a trace route. So we'll go trace cert. I'm on 192.168.2.4. So I'm tracing over to the server. So it hops to 1.2 first and then 2.4. So from host 1 did a trace route, and it hopped over to 1.2 here. This is 1.2, so that's the correct default gateway. Then over to 2.4 is the server. So what I do is if I turn off router 1, find out what happens. Case FA00. I'm going to show off the interfaces now. So I've shut off router 1, so it's not available. And so what I'll do is I'll run the same command, find out where it hops to. So it hops to 1.3 this time instead of 1.2. So it's going to 1.3 and then 2.4. Trace complete. So what it did was it shifted over. This 00 on router 2 is 1.3. It's 1.3 interface and 2.4. And so it shifted default gateways. And that concludes HSRP.